And if you don't believe that Jesus is a funny guy, you're going to have to do something with this parable, because I think this parable is hilarious. But a lot of y'all don't laugh at the same things I laugh at. So then he said to him, a certain man gave a great supper and invited many. And he sent his servant at supper time to say to those who were invited, come, for all things are now ready. But they all with one accord began to make excuses. Now look at the three excuses that are made. Here's the first one. The first said to him, I have bought a piece of ground, and I must go and see it. I ask you to have me excused. Now let me ask you a question. Who buys a piece of ground without seeing it first? Right? I think it's funny. Like, I gotta go. Well, I can't do that because I got this thing. I got some ground I bought, and I gotta go look at it. Okay, so here's the second one. And another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to test them. I ask you to have me excused. Now, I've never bought oxen, but I'm pretty sure if I bought them, I would test them out first. Like, I can't do that. There's some oxen I bought, and I have to go make sure that they can walk. Here's the best one. This one's awesome. Look at verse 20. Still another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. I think that verse is going to be a lot funnier for me here in a couple months, but like the first guy, he's like coming up with his he's like, man, I just can't, like, I got this thing I got to do. The other one's like, hey, I got this other thing I got to do. And the man's like, bro, I'm married. You understand, you feel me. I got to go. I'm married. So I cannot come. Look at verse 21. So that servant came and reported things to his master. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to the servant, go quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in the poor and the maimed and the lame and the blind. And the servant said, Master, it is done as you commanded, and there is still room. Then the master said to the servant, go out in the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say to you that none of those men who were invited shall taste my supper. You know what excuses does? The Lord's sitting here and he's making this banquet. And he said, I'm making this, and I'm gonna feed my children, and we're going to have communion, and we're going to talk, and we're going to laugh, and we're going to love each other. When you make excuses, you miss out on being fed in the kingdom. Wow. When I make excuses, I'm actually missing and pushing away the feast that the Lord's prepared for me. And it's usually the people that make excuses are the ones who complain about not being fed. I'm just not getting fed. Well, you probably are feasting on excuses is your problem. I love y'all. See, all these people had something invested. The first guy, man, I bought this land. I got some investment in this land. I got to go see. The second one, I got these oxen. I made an investment with these oxen. The third one said, I made an investment in my family. So they all had things invested, but just not in the kingdom. See, when you have more invested in your possessions than you do as presents, then you're in idol worship. When I have more invested in my stuff than I do in the spirit, then I'm setting myself up to worship idols. You miss out on feasting in the kingdom when you live by your excuses. I heard this quote. I'm a quote guy. Anybody like quotes? I love one-liners. I love quotes like that. And this quote I got when I was 16, and it's stuck with me ever since. It says, excuses are just a polite way of saying what you value most. Excuses are just a polite way of saying what you value most. So when I'm sitting here making excuses, what I really mean is, I don't have much value in this. But I don't want you to know I don't have value, so I'm going to make an excuse to make it sound like I'm busier than I really am. There's a verse in Proverbs that says, in the context of excuses, it says, the lazy man says, there is a lion in the streets, I shall be slain. I think this is funny because this man was supposed to be working, and his excuse for not working was there's a lion outside. Like, hey man, you need to be working. Bro, there's a lion outside. He's going to eat me. That's like me saying this. Man, Nathan, you really need to be working. There's a tsunami. Bro, you live in Big Spring. There's a tsunami somewhere. Like, you just never know these days. Like, you go out and you're not wise and you're done. You're going to meet Jesus before you think you want to meet Jesus. Right? Some of our excuses are hilarious. Like, man, there's a line. I don't know, there's a line somewhere, I'm sure. There's probably a line eating somebody right now. Excuses keep you from being a servant. Here's the fourth one. We'll go through these last two really quick. This one's a tough one because it takes a hungry person to admit this next one. And this is what it is, laziness. If I had a line, if we had a mic and I said, who wants to be the first person to come and confess they're lazy? No one, no one wants to be like, oh, I'm so excited about telling everyone I'm lazy. No one wants to admit being lazy. You're in Luke, flip over to James. Y'all still with me? Okay. There's a line in the streets. That's funny. James, let's start in chapter 1, verse 21. It says this, therefore lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. And look at verse 22. But be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourself. Then he gives this amazing analogy. He says, for if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. He's saying, when you hear the word, but you're not doing it because your spirit's rooted in laziness, you're like a man who comes up into a mirror, sees himself, turns around, and by the time he's out of the room, he forgot what kind of man he was. I want to tell you that a lack of identity is actually rooted in a lazy spirit. I see this all the time. Man, I just don't know who I am. And we talk about identity as if it's something that God's trying to hide from us. Like, that's just not true. As if God's up here saying, I want you to be confused. No, he's saying, this is who you are. If you want your identity, just ask me and I'll speak it over you. But when we're not doers of the word, we look at ourselves, turn around, and we forget who we are by the time we leave the room. So being a doer is actually connected to your identity. Let's read on. Verse 25, but he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the word, this one will be blessed in what he does. So he's sitting here saying, it's not good enough for you to just hear. You have to do. I went to a school called Bethel in California, and they're a little weird. Like, they're awesome. Like, I love them, but it's a good type of weird. Like, they're not like... Anyways, but they're a little different. But this story just kind of... I just think it's powerful. It's kind of funny, but it's powerful at the same time. They have a 24-hour prayer house, and it's all glassed windows, so you can see out while you're praying. They have a garden and stuff. And about a year ago, they had, it was a little longer than a year ago, they had this prayer meeting, and the Lord showed up and told them, he was like, hey, y'all are going to be one of the churches in the nation that actually attacks snakes. By snakes, I mean the enemy, the ways of the enemy. So you're actually not just going to be defensive, you're going to be offensive. You're going to go after them. Because he gave him a picture of a roadrunner. Because a roadrunner, as you know, is one of the only birds that will actually attack snakes. He'll get the eyes out, then eat the snake. So they're sitting here, and the Lord said, y'all are going to be like the roadrunner. Well, they're sitting there praying, and the pastor opens his eyes, and Pastor Bill Johnson, and he saw, guess what comes up to the window? A roadrunner. Now, it's in Northern California. There's not very many of those. Here comes a roadrunner up to the window. Not only was it a roadrunner, guess what it had in his mouth? A snake. Okay, so they're all fired up. They're like, woo, like we heard God. So every Monday they have a prayer meeting. So the next Monday they come back and they're praying. And about an hour into it, guess who shows up to the prayer meeting? The roadrunner with a snake in its mouth. Again. So this went on for like 3 months. And it was like a sign of like God, like, the roadrunner was like a sign of, anyway, it was really cool. So, and the word was, this is a representation of who y'all are. And so one day the custodian was cleaning the church, and he left the doors open. It was hot. And guess who got in the church? The roadrunner. So the roadrunner, and the custodian tells the story. He says, man, I was just in there where I was cleaning the sanctuary. I had some worship music on. I was worshiping. And I'm sitting there worshiping. And all of a sudden I look to my right, and the roadrunner is right next to me worshiping too. Now, I don't know what that looks like. And I'm not making a theological statement that animals worship, although I probably could. But, I don't know if it had, its little, he was like, Jesus. like praying over its mind, and like I don't know what it looked like.